at least half of a sunny day today to be here to improve your facility's emergency preparedness. Your desire to improve that preparedness is to be applauded. Your efforts and your time here today and throughout the year help build a more resilient healthcare community throughout the region. So a huge thank you to everyone who's participating today. I'd also like to say thank you to our volunteers, the event planning committee who make today possible, and to recognize our sponsoring organizations, the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Hampton Roads Metropolitan Medical Response System, MMRS, the Eastern Virginia Healthcare Coalition, and the Hampton Roads Regional Catastrophic Planning Team. So if you're a committee member or volunteer or a representative of that organization, you can stand up briefly and we can give you a good round of applause for thank you. Anybody? All right, thank you. So with that, I'd like to say good morning and welcome. My name is Dawn Brantley. I am the Regional Inclusive Emergency Planner for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and the coordinator of this event. Our region's healthcare providers have really come a long way since we started those 8 years ago. And this is our largest event to date, reaching out to a broader community and more training opportunities available than ever before. We have speakers from Virginia, Texas, and even all the way from Alaska here to give you information and to discuss engage in our emergency preparedness conversations. And we're using an exciting exercise track 3, that's being presented by the Eastern Virginia Healthcare Coalition. So there's a whole range of training available today. And I'd like to introduce our MC for the day, Mrs. Virginia International, Cheryl Nelson. Mrs. Nelson is working to raise awareness about natural disaster preparedness as Mrs. Virginia International in 2014. She is an Emmy-nominated broadcast meteorologist with a degree in meteorology from Penn State University. She is an official Weather Ready Nation ambassador for NOAA and a partner with HUMAN's Ready.gov campaign. Ms. Nelson is donating her time here today to help build a more resilient healthcare community. Hampton Roads. So please welcome Mrs. Cheryl Nelson.
Thanks so much, Dawn. Let's give everybody give Dawn a round of applause. She has been working long and tirelessly to put this event together. So thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to start this morning with a little bit of a story. My platform is natural disaster preparedness. And yesterday I was speaking with a business owner, and we were talking about protecting your building from things like hurricanes and whatnot. And I said to him, so are you prepared? What are you going to do to prepare your windows? His building was right off water. And he goes, oh no, we don't ever get winds like that here. Whenever we get anything, hurricane comes ashore. By the time we get here, it's a tropical depression or a tropical storm. So I don't worry about it. What do you guys think of that? Let's have a good boo. Here we go. He took everything I had and I jumped up and attacked him when he said that. I hope he's not here. I don't think so. That would be really bad if he wasn't here. So that's my platform, encouraging people to protect their families, themselves, their property, their pets from natural disasters. Because as many of you know, we can get hurricanes here. Anybody remember a bad hurricane here? Raise your hand if you do. I know not everybody is from around here, but how about Isabel in 2003? Oh yeah, I've had it from around here. That one wasn't even that bad in the grand scheme of things. When it came through here, Cat 1, what would happen if we had a Cat 2, Cat 3, even Cat 4, Cat 5? I know it hasn't happened in a very long time, but it certainly is possible. Anybody here old enough to remember Hurricane Hazel, Hurricane Donna? Ooh, look at that. Which one was worse? Raise your hand for Hazel or Donna. Okay. And I believe Hazel was I want to say it was a Cat 3 when it made landfall. So that was pretty bad. So as you know, we can get them. And so that's my message to you today. If you don't have a plan, go home tonight, talk to your family, just get everybody together and say, what would we do? Do we have a meeting place? Do we have an out-of-town contact phone number memorized, not on your cell phone, but actually you know it in your head, because sometimes cell phones might not work, you don't have power, you can't charge them, make sure you have that number. Do you know the risks? Do you know what kinds of disasters you're prone to? Do you know what here, wherever you are from? Do you know what kinds of disasters you can get? We now know here we can get earthquakes. Who remembers the earthquake that we had? Yeah, so, right, we can get all kinds of things. How about tornadoes, stuff up 2008? Anybody remember that? Yes, absolutely. So we get all kinds. Finally, I want you to have a disaster readiness kit. Who here has a kit at home? I should see everybody. Well, not. Okay, if you don't have a kit, it's easy to do just some things that you already know. Make sure you have water, a gallon per person for at least 3 days, non-perishable foods, flashlight, battery. You know what to have: first aid kit, emergency blanket, pet supplies, medical supplies, insurance papers. Just have everything together. So if you have to evacuate, you can scoop everything up and leave. Or if God forbid something happened, if there were a tornado or something like that, you have everything in a safe place and you know where to find it. Just keep that in mind, just some food for thought today. That's enough about me, but I wanted to give you my message before I went on, so thank you for your attention. But now we're going to turn to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. His name is Dr. Grady Bray, and Dr. Bray is a disaster psychologist with an international reputation as a lecturer, author, disaster survivor, and emergency response authority. He has appeared as a subject matter expert on such diverse programs as the Today Show, the Discovery Channel, the Learning Channel, FEMA's Recovery Channel, and was featured in an NBC Dateline segment which focused on surviving high-rise fires. Dr. Bray received his PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Georgia and went on to work as a clinical psychologist with the Georgia Department of Human Resources. In response to an invitation from the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry in Rochester, New York, Dr. Bray joined the faculty as an assistant professor of preventive family and rehabilitation medicine in 1977 and remained with the medical school until 1984. Dr. Bray started his own company in 1984 and today serves as the president of Bray Associates. He is an adjunct and frequent presenter for FEMA's Emergency Management Institute and was the first behavioral scientist for the Disaster Mortuary Operations Response Team. He worked the Oklahoma City bombing, numerous domestic and international air disasters, the World Trade Center attacks of September 11th, the UN bombing in Baghdad, the tsunami in Thailand, and Hurricane Katrina, Rita, and Ike. In 2003, he resigned as the Yates County, New York coroner and accepted a full-time position as vice president for a Texas-based disaster company where he established a family assistance program and worked there until 2006. Dr. Bray is active as a consultant and provides services to diverse groups such as the Fire Department of New York, the 911 Museum and Memorial, as well as private and government organizations. Dr. Bray has also provided assessment training and response teams for numerous international corporations, businesses, and companies. This morning, we'll be talking to us about disaster and emergency response, the trauma that does not bleed. Please welcome Dr. Grady Bray.
Good morning, everyone. That one doesn't work. Is mine on? 1, 2, 3. Let's double check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. How's that? That's better. Very good. All right. It's always a pleasure to be able to get out and work with people and talk about preparedness. Whoa, I feel like Moses is coming down. But you know, emergency preparedness begins with just one person. And that's each and every one of us, you and for me. This is where we start. And today we talk about psychological trauma. It really, how you're going to learn this material is dependent upon how you're hardwired. What's going on inside of you. As a matter of fact, I changed this program a few minutes ago because of one young lady sitting right here who's a student, and we got to talk a little bit, and I thought, wow, I've got to change what I'm going to talk about a little bit. So we modify things based on life experiences. And your experiences are a way to modify how you are hardwired. You know, when we talk about emergency preparedness, how you learn depends on all of this wonderful information that came into you from the time before you were born even. But let's talk about how you learn for a minute. I'd like you to do something. We'll start, like I said, with you. Would you please put your hands together like this? Just put your hands together like this. Okay? Now, I want you to look at your thumbs. Don't move them apart. Just look at your thumbs and where they are. Just check out where they are. Now, once you've done that, I want you to remember where your thumbs are, how they look. You can take your hands apart. If your right thumb was on top, this is what we know about you. First and foremost, we know you like to talk a lot. You are a big, some of you are still, and you're looking at somebody else's, that's cheating. That's a personality part, you know. If your right thumb is on top, you are a big talker. Now, how do we know this has nothing to do with whether you are right or left-handed? This actually has to do with something called thumb dominance. Because if your right thumb is on top, then the left side of your brain is your primary controller. The left side of your brain is your primary controller. Every word you say, every word you interpret comes from the speech center in your brain, which is in front of and above your left ear. It's a little area about the size of a 50-cent piece. Now, technically, it's called Broca's area, B-R-O-C-A. Broca's area. That's your speech center. So if your right thumb is on top, the left side of your brain is in charge, and you like to problem solve by talking, you probably have a reputation for someone that people can come to and talk with about their problems. And the other part that goes with that, the left side of the brain, you're very analytical. The real word for you is the word why, W-H-Y, why. When you were first born, and you were delivered, and they held you up by your little heels to squat your behind, like you did in the olden days, you did not even cry. From the beginning, you just said, "Wah!" You did all that. So you're very verbal, you're very analytical, but your saving grace is this: you are very logical. Things just need to make sense to you. Now, you have a vulnerability that way because if somebody really wants to annoy you, what they do is they do non-logical things, or they say things that don't make any sense. And it'll just bother you so much, and they'll go, gotcha. You know, they know that it's there. Well, rather than spending too much time with those of you with the left side of your brain in charge, what about those of you who have your left thumb on top? If your left thumb is on top, then the right side of your brain is in charge, the right hemisphere of your brain. What do we know about the right side of your brain? The right side of your brain, unfortunately, it has no words. There are no words in the right side of your brain. Your core, right side of your brain just gets no words at all to use. So it is the seat of intuition. Intuition comes from an area in front of our right ear, and up to the frontal part. This intuition is knowing without words. Now, let's be very clear. This is not whether you were psychic or not. If you want to know whether you're psychic or not, that's going to talk to you. 2 Tanqueray martinis on the rocks, with 2 hours in each one, in a bar somewhere tonight. We'll talk about your psychic abilities. As long as you're buying, I'm talking. So, and that's the way that is. But intuition is where we are constantly gathering information all around us. Did you know that 80% of what human beings communicate is without words? That's why sometimes you're working as actors and working as a coroner and literally doing thousands of death notifications. Sometimes people will say, well Grady, what do you say to somebody? What are the right words? There are no right words. There are no right words that you have to say. Certainly say something as simple as, I'm sorry for your loss, is very appropriate. It is the eloquence of your presence that makes the difference. the eloquence of your presence, of being there. So if you have a friend or a co-worker or someone in your church or whatever group who dies, and you go to, do they have call numbers here in Virginia? Do they do that still? I'm worried like you have visitation. So a lot of people get really weirded out by doing this. They pray all this like death there, Actually, death is the final stage of life for all of us. In the medical field, teaching in medical school, one of the things you learn very quickly is death is the ultimate healing. That's where you get to where there's no more pain for the body. The whole point, though, is this. You go, and you're there with people, and you may feel a little awkward and uncomfortable because you wish there was something you could say to them that would help them. And there really isn't anything that's going to take away their pain. You don't have that power. But by your presence, by you physically being there, you are being so much more eloquent in expressing your compassion and your concern. So it's just your presence that's enough. Sometimes I really wish that we all understood the power we have of silence. We need to fill our world with noise all the time. We need to talk, and people are talking, and if it's quiet for very long, they really get so upset. Because it's like somebody needs to say something. Well, not really. If someone is in pain, and we're talking about psychological trauma, if there's someone who is in pain, the greatest gift you can give them is not to try to solve their problem for them. Because you don't know what their real problem is anyway. Only they know that. But you have this wonderful gift. Every one of us has this as a birthright. If we can just learn to shut up and let people struggle a little bit. Because in human beings, there is no growth without struggle. There is no growth without struggle. Many years ago, when I first got out of undergraduate school, I taught in an inner city school in Macon, Georgia. These were the 15-year-olds waiting to be 16 so they could drop out of school. And I had 36 of them in one classroom, had them all day long. And I was supposed to teach them all kinds of things, English and how to use silverware, just anything you can imagine. That was it. That was my job. We were doing a little science section in our book, and it was time to talk about life cycles. And so I took the kids across the park, and in Macon they have something called a cherry blossom festival. Beautiful, important cherry trees. But we were looking for cocoons. I said, we're going to gather those up, and we'll bring them back, and we'll put them in window boxes, and every day somebody would have the job of being on cocoon watch you, kind of watch and see what's happening. I said, and once the little cocoon the butterfly starts to break out of its cocoon, you let everybody know. Well, the kids thought that was great, mainly because they're going to get out of the building and go over to the park. So we go over, and I'm looking for them to go snip off a couple of few twigs. All of a sudden, there's split blade knives and switchblades, and I swear machetes were coming out of their pants. They started whacking off these huge limbs. They are desecrating these trees, and they're destroying these trees. And I'm scared to death because I think the police are going to come and take me away. Well, anyhow, they're going to drag them across the road, back up the steps, get in the room, and they wheel them down until they get the little cocoons and the twigs on. Well, once the butterfly starts coming out of the cocoon, everybody gets all excited because whoever had the cocoon wanted to scream out, "The butterfly's coming out! The butterfly's coming out!" And we all run to the window, and sure enough, the butterfly would break out of the cocoon. He get up to the end of the twig, and he kind of flapped his little wings out over the top to the window box, and the butterfly would go off, and the children would cheer. After a couple of days of this, because they had like 62 cocoons in there, after a couple of days of this, I said, well, it's time for us to move on to our next unit, so we have to, let these butterflies go a little sooner. Who wants to help a butterfly get out faster? I do. Everybody was wanting to help. So I gave them the stash scissors for the 4 kids that were going to help out. Never had a child kill a butterfly. So carefully, because the cocoons actually made of threads. And so very carefully, they would just snip through one thread after another and after another. soon the little would burst open, and the butterfly would go up under the end of the twigs, and the children were watching, and the butterfly would fall over dead. And all the other children would start screaming at the horse, saying, "You kill butterflies! You kill butterflies!" And I said, "No, they really didn't kill the butterflies. But if the butterfly doesn't struggle to come out of his own cocoon, he doesn't activate his circulatory system, so he can't breathe." I said, "You're going to leave this year, and a lot of you are going to drop out. But I want you to remember one thing for the rest of your life, because at times life is going to be really hard. But if you don't struggle, you don't grow." That's all I ask them to remember from that. So when we're looking at each of us and how we learn, we're talking about the sense of intuition. Learn to pay attention to this gifted part of you that's there. Every bit as reliable as that verbal side of your brain. You are gathering information all the time. We use that when we're assessing people who are in difficulty because of experiences they've had. You have to learn to trust that non-verbal intuition that gives you that gut feeling. It's not your gut, it's actually the right side of your brain, obviously. And you say, "Well, how do you know that?" Well, it's just sort of a feeling I get. Learn to trust that, because it's every bit as valuable as that verbal part of your brain. By the way, those of you that have the left brain, that left side of your head in charge, you have an advantage going all the way through school. You have an advantage because in our country, the educational system is geared toward you. Does anybody in this room remember what the 3 R's? If you remember, just call it out. What are the 3 R's? Notice, you have to write, reading, writing, arithmetic, verbal, analytical, logical. The educational system historically in the United States was oriented toward people in the left side of the brain in charge. Shortly after Nixon went into China, I was with the first medical delegation to go in. That's a long time ago. But one of the things that we discovered there, working within the Chinese system, is that historically the Chinese system didn't use the left side of the brain in their educational system. They used the right side. Any of you who are training in martial arts realize that, and you know that martial arts really didn't develop as a way to go out there and kick your neighbors behind. It actually was about integrating your body into the space around you and being aware of your environment and your place in that environment. It's all right hemisphere dominant. But not only is intuition that part of us that's so important, but that right side of the brain also has to do with emotional intensity. Emotional intensity, the right frontal part. You get strong feelings about things. And heaven help anybody who ever does you wrong. You can hold a grudge forever. 10 years after the event, all of a sudden you finally come up with a perfect plan to get them back for something that happened 10 years ago. They can't even remember what it was about. They just know, I just got had big time and I don't know why. So they struggle with them, but you remember because you don't forget injustice or things that have been done to you. And payback, well, we know what payback is. Anyway, so that right side gives us that intuition, it gives us that emotional intensity. And what else has to do with creativity and spatial relationships? A lot of good stuff going on with that. But all of that's how we learn. If the right side of your brain is in charge, you actually learn better from visual stimulation. It's what you see. You can relate to pictures, you can relate to the left side, you relate better to words. So there's a symbolism that we see and we can interpret. The nice thing is, the wonderful thing is, both sides of our brain are connected. Both halves actually get a point when they get to meet together. But all of this, that's just hardwired. Once we get into this world, now we get into the issue of how we change, how factors in our families influence us, our society, our communities, our schools, our churches, all these different groups influence us, and we start to change who we are, and we grow and we develop as a part of that process. So you're going to be changing. I hope you're going to be learning something every day. You really should. You should learn something new every day to keep your brain plastic, to keep it flexible, to keep it working properly. Just like you need to exercise your body, you need to be exercising your brain. But we're talking about using these abilities we have, that this hardwiring, this wonderful gift that we're given at birth. It's just a marvel of how we're created. And then we get into what are we going to do with this? How are we going to change this so we can nurture other people, to take care of other people, and we can teach other people. Because it's often through our service to others that we define the meaning of our lives. I'm going to repeat that one for you, because if there's one thing this morning that I'd like you to remember, it is that one sentence. It is often through our service to others that we define the meaning of our lives. So our life becomes then a quest for service. How can we serve other people? Certainly we can serve our patients, but we also serve our co-workers. We serve our superiors, our bosses. We serve in our families. And we do it in ways many times we don't recognize as the true service that we offer. But today in particular, we're talking about someone who is harmed by some type of an event. Now, having worked a lot of disasters, I think I've done 28 major aviation disasters around the world, in addition to hurricanes and typhoons and all kinds of things like earthquakes, whatever. But it doesn't take these large-scale events for people to experience psychological trauma of some kind. But let's sort of define this process a little bit. Let's take out all the psychological babble, the psychobabble. Let's take that out. Let's talk about it in day-to-day sense. How is it that we can be psychologically traumatized? The process is actually very simple. First of all, we experience psychological trauma through our 5 physical senses. It is through what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch that this trauma gets into us. We experience it through our 5 senses. Fire chief called me once and said, Dr. Bray, I've got one of my firefighters. And he says that he's got PTSD. It's like a traumatic disorder. Now that's a mental illness. He said, would you evaluate it? I said, sure, I'd be glad to see you. So I go up and I visit. Started talking to the guy. First thing I asked him was, okay, I would like you to tell me in terms of your 5 senses, what did you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch during this event? Well, Doc, actually, I was down in Florida on vacation at the time. I was with my family, but when I got back, people were just talking about this, and we had some other things happening. I just realized I couldn't do this work anymore. I'm just so traumatized by what happened, that fire with those 5 little children that died. I cannot function any longer as a firefighter. So they said, no, you don't have PTSD. If you're going to have psychological trauma, you have to have primary sensory input. If you don't give input, you can't be traumatized by the experience. So people who get vicarious trauma, they just sort of hear about this and they're so affected by it. Sometimes I think that's the most misused diagnosis from a mental health standpoint in the world today. You respond and get a splinter in your finger and say, oh, I have PTSD. I need to go out on disability. Because this is a terrible splinter affecting my life. I can't get it out of my mind. I can't sleep well at night. I have to look at this all the time. No. If you're trying to exploit a system and just collect on your disability, that maybe that's the case, but you don't have PTSD from that. Okay, our process. And there are 3 steps to this process. 3 steps. The first one is we experience it through our 5 senses. Second step of the process, we interpret that information through our thoughts. What does this mean to me? How does this relate to me? For example, if we had a group of EMTs and paramedics, who are here today. And I want to say to them, what is the worst kind of call you ever get to respond to? What is the worst kind of call? Anybody there say what you just do? Might say, what call bothers more than any other? Yes. Child, children, kid calls bother us more than any other. Why is that? Because we can assign personal meanings about that call in terms of our lives. First of all, as a society, there's a general, it's called a morality, it's sort of a law, if you will, or belief. Think of it that way. It's a belief that most of the society has in that adults take care of children. That's why child abuse bothers us so much. The society has failed when that child is abused. Because we have a generalized belief that says big people take care of the little people. They're defenseless, they're not able to take care of themselves, we're going to protect them. As a society, that's one of the beliefs that we tend to share in. And when it fails, when children get abused, when children get injured, when children get killed, it's like, as a part of that society, I have failed. But also, there's something called a point of contact. Point or points of contact. How many different ways can I relate to this? I go out, I'm the EMT. I want to do we respond. Our regiment ready, boom, we're out the door, we're going to call, we get someplace. And there's a child involved. Well, I can relate to it in terms of my own children. If you have children that are approximately the same age, or if you have grandchildren that are approximately the same age, or children you work with on a regular basis that are approximately the same age, that is the single greatest impact that can occur on an emergency responder. We have so hard because we researched this for several years, upstate New York, with EMS and fire departments and emergency room departments, looking at rankings. What calls give us greater concern for people's mental well-being, their mental health? Which ones are all of us more vulnerable to? Turns out, kids are number one. The second group would be people who are the same ages as your surviving parents. Then thirdly, you get to people who are your age. Your age, you can identify with those. So when we see these things happening, you should at least be aware these folks are coming in that is just in a transport to a hospital, and two of the guys are talking about, all kids the same age. We should be a little more sensitive to that and be aware they're more vulnerable. They're more vulnerable. So how do we interpret this? What does this mean to me? That has to do with our values, our beliefs, how we view the world. We interpret that. It's one of the most common questions you get in big disasters. When you're dealing like the tsunami in Thailand, I was the IC, incident commander for 2 tours there. We recovered 6,000 bodies. And they had a process of 6,000 bodies. Different culture, different norms. As a matter of fact, one of the ironies was in Thailand, they're Thai Buddhists, which is different from Chinese Buddhism. But when you die in those communities, your family will take your body to the Wat, W-A-T-T, the Wat, which is a temple. And at the temple, there'll be a crematorium. And so you'll wait while the body gets cremated, which takes hours. In South Ronnie, that had helped to develop FEMA's mass mortality program and their training programs and the contingency plans for a lot of states. When people first start off, they say, well, we have an H9N7, which is the latest viral strains in Southeast Asia right now, which happens to be running a 67% mortality rate. Fortunately, it's not everywhere at this point. But H9N7, things are lovely, it's a mass mortality event, catastrophic event, pandemic, and we've got not a few hundred bodies, but we've got tens of thousands of bodies. Oh, we'll just burn. We'll just cremate them all. And I said, wait a minute. There's a little lack of understanding here. I weigh 1/8 of a ton. That's why some of you can figure that one out. I weigh 1/8 of a ton. A crematorium operates at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll take 4.5 hours to turn me into a whiskey cooler. It's going to take a long time to burn a body. We certainly can't burn, tens of thousands of bodies, so that's why we're going to run to good mass graves, actually. But anyway, our whole point with this is, as I just totally lost my train of thought, I don't know how I got off the list. I'm having to remove inside my head right now to get back to where I'm supposed to be talking. When we're talking about our values and our beliefs, and we interpret our experiences through those, then the third step of the process is, how do we express that? How do we express that? We express it through our emotions and our behaviors. So we experience it through our senses, we interpret it through our thoughts, we express it through our emotions and our behaviors, how we feel and what we do. So that gives us the key to truly understanding how do you assess someone to see if they've been truly psychologically damaged by this experience. You look for significant emotional or behavioral change. There is no list of, if these things happen, we've got to do something. We've got to do some type of crisis intervention. We've got to do psychological first aid, or we've got to do, counseling or therapy or whatever. There is no magical list for that. Way back in 1990, a guy named Jeffrey Mitchell and I wrote a book together called Emergency Services Stress. And that's the information we had at the time. We know now that what's in that book in terms of one section of about crisis intervention, something called critical incident stress debriefing, you should not do. You shouldn't. We didn't understand why you shouldn't do it. There are better approaches, better strategies. The reason you don't is because there is the potential to harm some people if you do that. It has to do with how the brain processes information and timing of information. But in the book, we actually had a list of these things happen. You should do some type of crisis intervention. Didn't take very long at all to realize once we had the book out, we were trying to apply everything in an ongoing way. We realized it's not based on an event, one event. It is based on the assessment of the individuals that are involved. Now, this is the good news. It turns out the human beings are very resilient. We really are. We're very resilient. We can handle a lot in our lives. But we also know, and I can tell you with complete assurance, anytime you work a large-scale event, whether it's a hurricane, whatever it may be, especially if you get into the hospitalities with it, you will be changed by the experience. You will be changed by that experience. But more than likely, you're not going to be overwhelmed by that experience. It'll just take you some time to incorporate that experience into the new norm of your life, what you are like today. You're not devastated by the experience. You do your job, you function, but you are affected by it. You're affected by it because it's a part of your life experience. And especially when we deal with issues involving mortality and pre-hospital care and hospital care, if the goal is you're going to keep people from dying, if that's your goal, you're going to lose. Every position and training I have ever tried to instruct or help understand what it means to be a physician or a doctor, if you will. The initials MD do not stand for name divine. It really doesn't stand for that. You don't have the power, ultimately, of life and death. Every patient you have will ultimately die. Every patient you have, because every one of us will ultimately die. We don't like talking about death very much. It kind of freaks us out a little bit many times. The truth is, in so many of the disasters or preparing for disasters, we have to anticipate serious injury, loss of property, and death as a potential consequence. Did you know this whole idea of us coming to grips with death as an issue is a developmental stage of the 50s. Now, everybody in this room knows that when a baby is born, that baby needs to learn to crawl, it needs to learn to walk, it needs to learn to talk. We talk about those as psychological stages they go through. But most of us think that by the time we get ready to talk, that's the end of the psychological stages. It actually isn't. We have developmental stages for every decade of our lives, no matter how long we live. And in our fifth decade, in our 50s, that is the time we come to grips with our own mortality. That's the time when we understand, not just in our heads, but in our hearts, wow, I really am going to die. This life is going to be over for me in terms of this body and this experience. I am going to die. But in pre-hospital and hospital care, and particularly in the face of large-scale disasters, we get confronted with mortality with every death we experience. So we are forced to deal with it. If you work in this area, you come to grips with it earlier than you're supposed to because of this reality confrontation of our mortality. Now, part of it is what we call developing a mature death attitude. Let's see how your death attitude is at this point. On a hopefully you have a bad piece of paper. If you have a bad piece of paper, would you please just draw a straight line from it, straight as you can draw it anyway. It doesn't matter if it's vertical, it's horizontal, diagonal, I don't care. Just know it's a straight line. We'll give you a moment to do that. Everybody knows that who wants to do it. And by the way, the irony of this is, for about 5 to 6% of the people in this room, you're not going to be able to complete the task I'm going to ask you to do. You will not be able to do it. So if you can't do it, or if you find yourself saying, well, you don't want to do that, that's okay. You don't have to do it. You're voluntary. So you have your lines drawn now. On one end of that line, I would like you to put the letter D, as in Delta or dog, the letter D. On the other end, I would like you to put the letter B, as in boy. Now that you've done that, you have actually created a representation of your lifeline. The B actually stands for your birth, and the D stands for your death. Now, for those of you who can, this is the part where we hear people just can't do it. It's okay if you can. But we're going to put a cross mark, a hash mark on that line where you are today. Cross the line where you are today. Now, then people say, oh, Dr. Ray, I can't do that. What if I put it back too soon? You know, I may be down sooner than I planned on. I don't think it works quite like that, but if you just can't do it, it's okay. A mature death awareness, this personal issue in terms of the psychological trauma of coming to grip with who you are, would say that if you were mature, that lifeline is crossed really through about where you are today. Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's suppose that line represents 100 years. By the way, a little girl, female, who was born in 2010 in this country, has a life expectancy of 100 years. 100 years. If you're male, guys, we just suck. That's all there is to it. But our life expectancy, if you were born in 2010, which none of you were, obviously, but if you were born in 2010, your life expectancy as a male is 86 years. 14 years less than for a woman. Guys, don't worry about spending the money. They're going to get it in the end anyway. You know, just have some fun in life. If you need that new fishing boat, go there. You know? And those new lures they come out with every year, you can get a whole stockpile. You might as well spend it now if you're not going to spend it later. So, but if we say half of the line you have drawn represents 50 years, if you were to crease your paper, which you don't have to do, you just look at it and see, and then a fourth of it would be 25 years. How realistically did you really draw the line? Now, I can't see a lot of lines from up here, but I have to watch it. If you know, some of you are extremely optimistic. I think some of you have a 140-year life expectancy based on what that line is crossed today. But as we go through this process, we're interpreting all of this. We're assigning that meaning to us personally. And how I view life, how I think about life, all of those are the values that I carry. It's like the preoccupation we have in our society with living pain-free lives. Folks, if you live one that everybody in this room is over 20, which I think everybody here is over 20 probably, There are three changes already taking place in your spine and your joints right now. And by the time you get, the truth is, as we age, our bodies deteriorate. They do. It's normal. It is natural. You know, I was talking to someone earlier about the abysmal state of long-term care, you know, in Texas. And a part of that is in Texas, it's a very affluent state. Terrible mental health and terrible long-term care in the state because of the administrations that are in place that refuse any type of funding and all kinds of issues, but that's politics. But Texas is a state that is focused on being young, beautiful, and healthy. So as you age, and we're not so beautiful as we age in terms of looking at us compared to when we were 25 or 30, you know, that sense of beauty, we have to mature in how we look at beauty, what beauty really means. But we certainly aren't young anymore, and we're not as healthy anymore. That's a reality of life. You know, we can get replacements on our knees and our hips. You can get cosmetic surgery. Texas is great, but Texas leads the nation in cosmetic procedures, particularly for girls under 15. Under 15. It is not uncommon in some places around Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, for a girl for her 15th birthday present, she gets her first cosmetic surgery. It defies imagination at times. Anyway, so our values, and we as a society, we are aging. We're getting older. Median age is moving up. So in terms of long-term health care issues, it's a major concern for our whole nation. But for people who really long-term health care, one of the end products of that is they see a lot of people who die. They get to know people who die. Loss in our lives is cumulative. Loss is cumulative. Every death of someone you know or are close to brings back the deaths of everybody else you've experienced in life. And that is why, as we age, we're becoming more sensitive to people that we know, or sometimes even people we don't even know, who are dying. I'm still amused when I go sometimes to visit some of my patients in long-term care facilities. The big thing for them is, reading the obits. They get the papers in the morning and everyone sees who died. Because they're like, I knew this one, and I knew that one. But the worst offenders amongst those are people who were previously home health nurses. Home health nurses are a little obsessive compulsive anyway. I will tell you that I'm going into surgery, I want a great obsessive compulsive charge nurse there. That circulating nurse, I want her to be really young, to be really obsessive compulsive. Keep track of everything, don't think of anything inside of me. Just have somebody there who's going to look after me that way. But the point is, this idea of confrontation with death is one of the earliest sources of psychological trauma that we see in healthcare providers. Because we don't always do a good job training people to assess properly how well we did. When I took my first EMT course many years ago, they taught us about doing CPR, how we're going to save people's lives. If you're doing EMT, you're going to save lives and get people to hospitals and they're going to do fine. Nobody bothered to tell us that a lot of times they die in transport, they're dead when we get there. We just take them out so the family will feel better. Because officially they get pronounced to the hospital, not in the home, which is very important, by the way, in Texas, because in Texas you have to declare everybody's died in your house when you sell it. So you know what? Death recorded in your house because people were weird about that, like you said. And so nobody dies at home in Texas. You always die in the emergency room. When you get there, you are pronounced dead there. So we transport dead folks a lot of times in Texas. It got really cold. It talk a long time. But anyhow, you didn't die there, but you died in the emergency room. Of course, the emergency room people get a little more with that because their staff's a little terrible. You go there, you're going to be dead 100% of the time. And you don't want to go there, and you go back. You go like, no, most people who go there are dead before they got there. So, statistics are a strange thing. You can't satisfy everybody with this. But our point is, we have to look at all of these events that happen to us. And we assess our employees, we assess our colleagues, we assess our friends. Are we seeing significant changes in their behavior? And that does not mean that the person is now sitting around crying and wailing and moaning. You know, because we're in a significant change. Sometimes when people are getting depressed, they get agitated. They talk a lot more. They talk faster. We're looking for any kinds of changes that let us know. One of the things, by the way, how am I doing with time? Oh, okay. Actually, I get to talking. I have so much fun doing this. I'm in track of time. And so I've got a couple of folks that's supposed to be, waiting, and we say, oh, well, your time's almost up, because I think it's rude looking on watch all the time. But it's okay. We've got a few more minutes, so we're all right. When we're looking at the interventions, what are we going to do for people who are going through these difficult times? One of the first things that you can do as a person is to simply be honest. To be able to say to somebody, I've seen that you're acting different, and I'm worried. I'm concerned about you. And then at that point, you use your magic. The magic you have is silence. You simply said, this is what I've observed. This is how it has affected me. I've seen that you're acting differently. You're not saying, well, you're really messed up. You are just acting so weird. I've seen you're just acting different. You're not acting like you normally do. I'm worried about you. I'm concerned. And if you're not concerned, don't say that. Don't lie to people. Because that intuitive side of their brain many times lets us know when people are just saying words, and the words are not congruent, they're not in line with the feeling that's there. So be truthful to people. If you don't say that to somebody, you're acting differently, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you. And then you let the responsibility be on them. You don't have to save them. You can't save them anyway. Let the responsibility be with them to be able to talk with you. What they need many times is just the opportunity. And by doing that, you are giving them permission. That is such a powerful tool to give to somebody. Do you know how often it is that we have people who actually listen to us? It's actually very rare. It's rare. Most of the time, we don't listen to people very well either. We really don't. We listen to maybe one or two concepts out of their mouths, and then, we think, we're going to say that to them. It's all about me. When I take teams out around the world, which is what our business does, and we set up a family assistance center website. Always, when you leave the community room, there's a sign we put up over the door, and it simply says, it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about them. If we can get that mindset tied up with that concept of service to others, then what we do is we make an observation. We talk about how it's affected us. I see that you're acting differently. Or I can hear in your voice that it seems to me something's just different. I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you, whether you're my friend, whether you're my coworker, whether you're my family member, whatever it may be, and then we just wait. And we let them do their butterfly thing. We let them struggle. Let people struggle. Do you know most of the time when we think something is wrong, we engage in a social game with them? And the game has some very set rules, though. I might say, I just don't understand what you're doing. Something's clearly wrong with you. And as soon as I make that observation, we're starting, if I don't know the right questions to answer, we're starting into this game where I keep trying to guess what's wrong with you. And the rules are that no matter what I guess, they're wrong. That's the rule. No matter what I guess, it's wrong. Because in the end, you can go away and be frustrated with me because I'm so ignorant, I can't figure out what's wrong with you anyhow. The whole point is, we need to learn to let people struggle on their own. We need to let people try to define from within themselves what it is that needs to be changed in their lives. Now, if they ask us for suggestions or ideas, once they define what the problem is, oh, we're always great at that, we come up with lots of ideas, and most of them are good ones. They really are. Nothing wrong with helping somebody that way. But early on, the real key to helping a person who's been through some type of psychological trauma is simply to listen to them. And you listen to them by being quiet. I'm amazed, and people get sympathy and empathy confused. Sympathy is very important. Now, don't get me wrong, sympathy is very important. Sympathy is simply acknowledging the loss that someone has gone through. Sympathy is important to us because if I give sympathy to you, and I know that you focus on the past, on loss, and your powerlessness to change that event. If someone that you love has died, and I say, I'm so sorry for the death of you or whoever, that's an expression of sympathy. How does that help you? It helps you because, number one, it is a focus on the loss, which you need to embrace in order to move on with life. By the way, people don't get over deaths either. That's one of the things that really annoys me. People say, well, you just got to get over this and move on. No, you don't get over it. If my child dies, I will never get over it. I will let a new norm for my life that will embrace the loss of my child. And that doesn't mean I'm grieving, mourning, and in tears for the rest of my life. But I am substantially changed by the loss of that child. I adapt to it. I don't get over it. So what we're doing, though, here is we're allowing people to go through this process of struggling, of defining from within themselves what the real issues are. I think some of you in one of your tracks will be dealing with some psychological first aid issues. Some of you may be looking at different interventions that are going to be taking place. But through all of this, the foundation for almost everything you're going to experience in terms of helping someone else who deals with a significant psychological event is the ability to be honest with people and to give them the time and the quiet to struggle on their own. Now, I was told I need to leave a couple of minutes here at the very end in case anybody had any questions. I know in a room this size it's very difficult for people to ask questions. But if anybody should have a question, this is the time that has been set aside for them. Anybody have a question, we'll wrap this session up. Okay, I really didn't think you would because it's kind of intimidating to do in a group this size. I apologize that I went about 5 minutes over what I was supposed to. Thank you all very much for this morning. I'll be around for the afternoon. If you have a question, come see me again. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's get another round of applause for Dr. Bray. Isn't that amazing? Kind of makes you think a little bit, doesn't it? Certainly made me think. And I gotta say, it actually kept my attention for all that time, which is very rare for anybody to do for me. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, well, Dr. Bray, appreciation for your time and presentation and support of the Hampton Roads region. We would like to present you with this digital photo frame. This frame has beautiful pictures from all over the region and a thank you certificate as well, and the certificate inside it. We thank you for your participation at the 8th Annual Healthcare Organization's Emergency Preparedness Seminar. Your contribution to this training has helped the Hampton Roads healthcare community become better prepared for disasters. We wish you tremendous success in your endeavors and offer our deepest thanks for your service. Thank you again, Dr. Bray. All right, well, it's time to take a break and head into our first session. Presentations will begin in about 10 minutes, so we're looking at about 10:05, does that sound right? I'm sorry? 10:10? Okay. At about 10:10, and the room numbers are listed on your program schedule. If you have a number on your badge, you are registered for track 3, Building a Resilient Healthcare Community. And that number on the badge is the table to which you are assigned. When you enter the room, please locate the appropriate table, and table assignments were made to distribute expertise to serve the representatives evenly. Thanks so much, and enjoy your break.
Are you done with your cup? Yes. I'll go grab these and I'll be right back. Thank you. Do you need me to do anything in the other rooms before I go to the rooms and make sure that's good?